Laban, thank you so much for making the time. I'm really excited to chat with you and share your story and journey with my audience. Welcome to the show.
Yelena, spasiba bolshoye. Thank you very much. Muchos gracias from Mexico.
I'm very impressed with your Russian. It's not many people can pronounce it well, and you do a very good job. So kudos to that.
Well, it helps that I'm married to a beautiful Russian, 3/4 Russian, 1/4 Japanese. Her name's Anya, and we just got married a couple of months ago. We've been together 4 years. So I want to be able to pronounce it in a way that it sounds like I might be Russian. You know, it means a lot to me. So there you go.
You could pull it off, and congratulations on the recent marriage. That's awesome. And what a beautiful place to be in Mexico. That's a great place to be as well. So you're just living it up at the moment. So Laban, tell us a little bit just to set the context for the audience to get to know you a little bit more. Give us a little snapshot of your career, your journey, before we really start diving deep into some of the things that we're going to be talking about today.
I'm the world's best courage coach, and I teach people how to take bold, massive, and strategically courageous action to facilitate their own miraculous outcomes, Yelena. And I do that by being a speaker, a coach, a podcast host of a couple of different podcasts. I'm a published author, and I run events, and I've also got a mastermind called World's Best.
And so your story starts way before that, however, right? So you've had in order for you to kind of get to this point of saying, you know, what is it that qualifies you to talk about courage and to talk about change and to overcome these things and really help people develop in those areas? It's probably because of your own journey. And tell us a little bit more about what has sparked your career of what you're doing today.
Well, and I appreciate you asking that question, because whenever this comes out, August 26, 2022, I'll be celebrating 60 years without a single drop of alcohol. And it's longer for drugs, it's longer for gambling, it's longer for philandering. And in more recent times, negative self-talk and limiting beliefs have all gone the way of the dingo. And that for me was a tremendous journey that started one night at home with 3.5 bottles of appropriately priced Pinot Noir sort of coursing its way through my veins. And I was on a laptop betting on a horse race, gambling on a horse race in a country that I wasn't in, spending money that wasn't mine. And I had this epiphanous moment, Yelena, where I saw a phone number in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. And I'd been on the screen many, many times before, but I'd never seen this number before. And it was the number for the Gamblers Helpline. And without even really putting any thought into it, I called this number. It was about 11:30 p.m. And this amazing woman, Mary, picked up the phone, and her name, I'll never know her last name, but I'll call her my Mary Magdalene, because she was my guardian angel, whether she knew it or not. And she shared with me some really bone-chilling statistics around gamblers. And gamblers commit suicide way faster than alcoholics or drug addicts and any other dysfunctional disorders, because of how quickly you can lose everything. Now, on the surface of it all, I was a high functioning, I was employed, I used to work in recruitment. I had friends. I used to wish people happy birthday on Facebook. I turned up to work on time. I was high functioning, but I could see it very quickly slipping away from me. And this woman, Mary Magdalene, put me in touch with a gambler's counselor. And for 1.5 years for free, for the first time I got a return on my gambling investment, I got access to this amazing woman who shared with me about the link between coping mechanisms and escapism behavior that children develop as the result of growing up in a less than nurturing environment, which is a fancy word for dysfunction or trauma, right? For me, it was nothing more innocuous than being a child of divorce and being raised by parents that were ill-equipped to esteem themselves at the time, let alone their kids. And one of the things that I would really encourage people listening to this to think about is that I meet so many people that diminish their own experience, as a child. And they say, I didn't go through the sexual abuse. I didn't go through being adopted. I didn't go through this other stuff. Well, it doesn't matter. And there's plenty of studies that show that children that grew up in Syria exposed to bomb blasts have the same damage to the same part of the brain that children who have been molested and sexually abused experience. And that was a really powerful example and metaphor for never comparing myself to anyone apart from the person I was the day before. And so when I learned that, I started to reverse engineer everything I'd gone through, Yelena, and I went through this amazing healing journey of figuring myself out and unlearning all the negative stuff and then relearning how to become a functional member of society. And here I am, very proud to share. It's nearly 6 years without a drop and no desire to do so. I never went through a 12-step. I don't suffer with want or cravings.
Hey, you, thanks for watching. If you're enjoying this episode, make sure to share it with friends and family who might find it interesting. Make sure to hit the subscribe button as well to stay up to date on weekly new videos that are going to be coming out with some awesome guests that I bring on. And if you have any questions, use the comment section to ask me questions, to interact. I look forward to talking to you. And so through this, so I'm sure there has its ups and downs. So is there ways that you've was there somebody around you? Was there a support network, I assume, maybe through through these conversations? Like, what was it that actually helped you maintain that and stay within that journey to where you are today?
Look, the obvious answer whenever I get asked this question is that I was in a tremendous amount of pain, and the pain of staying and doing what I was doing was way worse than the pain of the unknown. And the conversations with the psychologists were great because it was an opportunity for me to share without judgment for the first time in my life. And I didn't have many people that I could talk to about this. I think my younger brother was privy to a number of the earlier conversations. But as I gained in confidence and started reclaiming my power again and started controlling the outcomes, and, Sterling Hawkins talks about, hunting discomfort. I started to hunt out the discomfort component. Then I became a lot more comfortable sharing what I was going through. And it's gotten to the point now where, when my book came out, it's all on the table. It's all there. And if I was to ever run to become prime minister or president, there's no dirty laundry that hasn't been aired. It's all there. So it holds no dominion over me now. So come at me, bro, is what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's such a valid point. I think that once you face all of that BS and whatever it is that you had to deal with, I think because a lot of times it's really just our own perceptions of ourselves, our own self-talk and what we believe about ourselves that we think that people might be thinking, but a lot of times it's not even they're not even thinking that. So it's a lot about what happens internally. So if you don't mind me asking, but talk to me a little bit about kind of what was your self-conversation like before versus as you were going through this, and when did you realize you're like, I've been talking to myself completely the wrong way, and this, has there been a change, or was it impactful for you? Do you think there's something to it?
Massive change in language. And if you can catch me saying anything negative about myself without me, stipulating that it is for effect, I'll be very impressed. I have removed, to the best of my ability, all negative self-talk, right? And when I was younger, I used to seek validation, and I would use self-deprecating language and humor, and I would do things that would to make people laugh at me. And I don't do that anymore, right? And what happens is when you eliminate negative self-talk, right? And it's not that I'm delusional, I reframe it and I find more constructive ways of using it. But when you eliminate all that negative self-talk, like you become hyper conscious of how other people around you speak. And I realized very quickly that I was surrounded by equally wounded people. And it's not that they're bad people, but you become like the 5 people you spend the most time around. You must have heard this time and time again, right? You even earn within a few $1,000s. And so I had to really separate myself from those circles of negativity. It's hard to fly like an eagle when you're surrounded by turkeys, right? And so as I healed and as I went through my journey, and particularly when I quit drinking, I lost like 97, 98% of my former circle of friends. And that was a challenge in itself. Lifelong friends, people have been, since my early years on the planet, no longer, poof. And but I have to live my truth. I have to live my purpose now. And I choose to surround myself with, like Les Brown says, OQP, only quality people, to the best of my ability.
OQP, I love that. OQP, only quality people. I like that. And then, so after you've kind of left that environment, was there a time where you spent a lot of time on your own before you were actually then with new people and different people? Was that difficult for you? Because that's what I see often with individuals is when we're leaving one part of our lives, there's that moment where you're just kind of on your own and you don't have the same circles and you're kind of trying to figure out what that circle might look like, and then eventually you kind of build your new tribe, so to say. Did you have that, or like how did you, how were you beginning to attract? Was there some self-work that had to be done in order for you to start attracting a different kind of individual?
Yeah, it was a pretty steady, slow and steady progress. I remember that, I was in a relationship with the girl for a year, and I spent the majority of the year with them. I would always stay at her place, and very rarely would she stay at mine. And so occasionally I would invite my friends to come and socialize with them. They were slightly more sophisticated and not as sloppy in terms of their drinking and some of the shenanigans they would get up to. I saw them certainly as more sophisticated. And so there was that year away, and then that relationship ended. And then I started dating a girl who was a Christian girl, who was a virgin, and like the polar opposite of the kind of people that I would hang around with. So her and I would spend a lot more time together. So I was kind of finding my tribe, albeit very small. And in the meantime, I will credit my younger brother with being a beacon of hope and light. And he had a couple of young kids at that time, and I would spend all of my holidays traveling interstate and spending time. I'd go 4 times a year to spend time with them. So I was kind of able to disassociate myself at that time. But there was certainly periods where I became disillusioned and lonely. And I was thinking, what have I done? Is it me? But as my self-belief and my self-confidence began to grow and I started attracting more high quality people, it became very apparent that what I was doing was the right path. And you just need to trust your intuition. You need to trust your gut, and you'll know if you really pay attention to it that you are doing fundamentally the best thing that you can do for yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to recognize, because I think a lot of people are just expecting that this transition to whatever change may be, right? It can be different types of change, that it's going to be quick and it's going to be smooth. And a lot of times there's that process that takes place, and the process takes time, and it's normal to feel lonely and etc. But not to go back to that old side. But of course it happens, and even if you do go back, it's just a matter of like, okay, let me remove the obstacle that stopped me last time and try to continue to move forward. And are there any particular habits or routines that you have in your day that helps you maintain this balance, that helps you keep moving forward?
Yeah, this is a really fascinating question, and one that will probably shock most of the people that are listening, not because it's shocking, but because it's completely different to what you might expect. I fundamentally, Yelena, believe that the majority of the success that I got from a healing, a recovery, and a progress point of view was underpinned by massive dietary shift, right? Massive dietary shift. I had an incurable autoimmune disease that I managed for 17 years that I was told I was going to have to live with. And when I fixed that by a simple shift, I cut out bread and refined grains, refined carbohydrates, my brain started working better. And then for 3 years, I cut out all plants out of my diet, and like 99.9% of what I ate was animal products. And I healed my gut in the process. And as a result, I would get really great, restful, deep, restorative sleep, right? And I became super fit. I lost 60 pounds of body fat and put on 30 pounds of muscle, and went from running 3 miles, which is 5 kilometers, to 26 miles or 42, a marathon, in 2 weeks. And then I ran a 30 miler 5 weeks after that, and then completed my first 60 miler 12 weeks after that. And when I would go on these runs, Yelena, I was experiencing these unbelievable moments where I would burst into tears of joy. And I really feel, and I've spoken to a few spiritual people and a few medical experts on this, no one's been able to give me specific answers, but I really feel that the toxins that I'd accumulated in my body, stress and trauma and all these other things, had been stored somewhere in my body. And I believe that the amount of running that I was doing at that time burned off whatever was, and fat is where the body stores toxins, right? That's a known thing. I'm not talking about metaphorical, but like asbestos, stays there or whatever. And I really feel that because I was burning off all this stuff, I feel like it was being free. It was coming off my shoulders. Really fascinating experience and like euphoria. And it makes sense because when you're in a very low carb diet, you generate a lot of ketones, and there's 3 ketone bodies that exist. And one of them is called alpha hydroxybutyrate. And off the back of that AHB, the body actually generates small amounts of GHB. Now, GHB is a familiar name for people that used to go partying and clubbing. It's known as like fantasy, or it was notorious for being a date rape drug. Well, the body produces this stuff naturally, right? And I was experiencing massive amounts of euphoria, and I was not drinking or taking drugs or doing anything. So it was the body generating. And long story short, I really, really, truly believe that was the catalyst for my healing. Not the only thing, but a huge proponent of why I was able to heal and conquer all of that addiction so effortlessly.
I think that's so beautiful to hear. I was actually, I'm doing this program. It's around cognitive neuroscience. And this last semester, we had a whole section of gut health and the brain, and how it impacts our mood, how it impacts our decision-making, how it impacts everything that we do is the gut health. And I don't know, obviously I'm not a scientist, but just what I've learned in that class and kind of what you're saying, there's just so much truth to that. And there's so much, not only in the health, on the physical health, but the mental health aspect of it. It's just, there's just so much to it. And I wish people would know. And the whole aspect of the fat, just listen, I appreciate, people that are all about kind of positive body image and all of that, but we cannot ignore the science, which is fat is where a lot of things are stored. That's just the reality. It's not about, how somebody looks. It's just about the physical aspect of it, right? So it's having more muscle than fat, and kind of just having that lean body. So I think it's, and yet again, scientists and doctors, they talk about it all the time, but then I feel like from a societal perspective, we're kind of shifting in this other way because we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But in reality, we have to also pay attention and get the right information that's out there. So and I've talked to a couple people on my podcast that are health nutritionists, and they talk a lot about that, where they actually healed themselves. And the reason they're doing what they're doing today is because they've healed themselves from different illnesses and diseases, and they realized it was all from food. So it's very interesting to hear.
Well, it's your show, Yelena, and you don't need to upset anyone, but I can. And what I would say to people, right, is that I've been fat and I've been jacked, and I'd rather be jacked any day of the week, because for people that have never been healthy, right, and I still got work to do, don't get me wrong, but people treat you better when you're healthy. Like, you can get away with murder when you are good looking, right? And like, society can purport to be okay with these plus size models, but when you start mucking around with evolutionary driven desires and mating preferences and health, you're going to lose every single time. So you can live in la la land, and we're moving into a society which is going to get a very quick slap back down to earth, because we've gone from being very underbalanced and intolerant at times to unbelievably too tolerant, and it's allowed weakness to form in society. And unfortunately, it's not doing society any favors, right? So that would be, I'm not blaming anyone. I don't want to judge anyone for being fat, but the moment that you start accepting it as like it's a good thing, then you're doomed, because you can positive think that and reaffirm that chant all you like, but you're not gonna get the outcomes that you would if you were healthy, because being healthy is a visual stimulus of discipline, right? And if you're morbidly obese, it's proof that you are ill-disciplined. And people might say this thyroid stuff, it's all bullshit. Trust me, all right? You can pretend like it's genetic, but you got to have a trigger. And trust me, when you don't anything, that fat's not going to stay. Trust me.
No, I mean, I tend to agree with you on that side, and I think that, and sure, I'm sure there's some medical situations where it is some kind of clinical issue. I'm sure there are. I'm not a doctor, I cannot speak on it, but in most cases, it just comes down to lifestyle. In most cases, it comes down to what you're putting on your body, the sleep amount that you're getting, and the exercise level. And this is where people just cannot lie to themselves in that thing. You know, you have to be just very realistic about yourself. So, but anyway, yeah. So it's and again, science proves it. Like I've studied this in my course, and I'm one of the like really great programs and this stuff, and it's valid stuff. It's valid stuff. So I'm really glad that also helps you, and you're yet another example that there is something to it.
Well, Yelena, just quickly on that, and I won't spend much time on it, but just next time you're looking at the news, right, or a protest, okay, and I'm not going to vent my my preferences, but let's say Roe v. Wade, right, huge hot topic recently. Have a look at particularly the females that are at those protests. Have a look at them and pay attention to objectively what they look like physically, all right? And what you'll find, maybe I should just let people, you know, and I'm not trying to judge here, but just pay attention to the people that are causing the most fuss about this kind of stuff, right? And there's a lot to be said, a lot of hardcore science that's coming out that being excessively overweight causes a litany of health problems, which all relate to insulin resistance, right? Insulin resistance drives pretty much all chronic disease, all right, as a base fundamental thing. That's just what I would say to that.
It's a good point. I never thought about it from that perspective, but it's a good point. I wanted to also talk to you a little bit to go back to that self-talk, because I think it's so essential, and I think that's a lot of reasons why we're not able to make necessary changes in our lives. So can you just go back to and talk to me a little bit about your watermelon seed story? This is something you wrote on your blog, and I want you to just dive a little bit deeper into that. Tell us that story.
Yeah, well, this is a story that was passed on to me by a friend of mine, Dr. Laban Ditchburn, who's an AI expert and someone who's invested a lot in professional development. And as part of a study that he did as this natural medicine university degree, it was in, I think he did it out of Western Australia, in Australia, right, Perth. And what they did is they had three control watermelon seeds. So they were set up identically. And they had one watermelon seed where they just left it there. One watermelon seed where someone came in and for a few minutes a day was basically abusing the seed, right? Like, like you're worthless, you're worthless, you're never going to grow, you're never going to do any of this stuff, right? And then the third one was someone who was lovingly telling the seed, I love you, I believe in you, you're going to grow to 10 centimeters, right? Well, and this has been repeated countless times, by the way.
Right.
Well, what do you think happened, right? The one that was spoken to lovingly grew to be 10 centimeters long. The other one, I think, grew a very minute amount, and the one that had nothing might have been maybe a little bit more, right? It was so interesting. And this, when you talk about vibrational frequencies, and sometimes people can go, oh, you're getting really woo-woo, whatever. Well, we know that like at a molecular level, we are like vibration, we are vibrating. And you want to be around high vibrating people. You don't want to be around dull, low vibration people, right? And so I think, you know, there's people that are far more researched and studied on these kind of projects. That's just one particular one that caught my eye, and really just, it was a powerful metaphor for life for me.
Yeah. Listen, I talk to my plants. Okay. I give love to my plants. I'm that person. I believe in it. I'm with it. So I don't care what people say. There's something to it. Okay. Because my plants are growing.
Well, they feel pain. There's something that came out recently. They feel pain. And it makes sense. It makes sense, right?
It's living just because they're not living the way that we are experiencing life, right? It doesn't mean that they're not experiencing life on their own. So it's no, it's very interesting. Something you mentioned, I'm just looking at my note here, and I remember on your one of the things I was reading, and you said hitting rock bottom doesn't physically hurt. It is more on the mental and the emotional part. And I think for those that are listening, because I feel like, people deal with challenges all the time, and rock bottom can look very different to different people. But talk to me a little bit about how it doesn't actually fit, it doesn't actually hurt you physically, but it's more on the other aspects. And what would you say to somebody feels like they're at that rock bottom right now?
Well, I would be willing to bet, given the number of people that listen to this and watch this podcast of yours, and if you haven't already, you should subscribe and leave a review for this, because she's putting out amazing work. So keep up the great work, Yelena. But what I would say, there'll be people out there listening to this right now that are oblivious to the fact that they are entering rock bottom for themselves. And it's because what we imagine rock bottom would look like and feel like versus reality can be very deceiving. And particularly when you've been so caught up in your own life and you think you're doing the right things, and you've got other people around you that are placating you, that are telling you that everything you're doing is fine and yada, yada. Sometimes that's not actually true. But it takes an experience where, again, you have to be in enough discomfort to want to do something about it. All right. So I got off lucky, right? I've had people that I've interviewed and that have interviewed me. There's a guy, Dr. Rob Kelly, who's an English guy based out of Texas, who's an addiction recovery expert. He's got a PhD in psychology. This guy used to be a session guitarist in Abbey Road Studios and has played with Queen and Elton John and the best of the best. This guy was such a degenerate alcoholic that he stabbed his wife in the face and spent a year and a half homeless. All right. He's done so much damage to himself, and he's been clean and sober for years now and is doing amazing things and has like a 97% success rate with people that are going through rehab with him. And to give you an idea, normal drug and alcohol rehab is about a 3% success rate. All right. So this guy's doing amazing things. But this guy is one of the worst stories I've ever heard. All right. And I don't know whether that would be something that I would have ever been able to endure. For me, maybe my tolerance was a lot lower. Whatever your tolerance is, right? All you've got to do is become aware of what it is, and then you can start making change. And the beautiful thing, Yelena, about hitting rock bottom, right, is that it gives you something that you can use, firsthand experience that you can then go on and inspire and empower people. And if you've ever seen that movie, Catch Me If You Can, with Leonardo DiCaprio, right? He plays Frank Abagnale, who impersonated Pan Am America pilots and went all around the world. One of the other things he did is he taught a whole semester of school, right? Mm. And he was interviewed years later, and they said, how did you, he was 17, how did you do that? And he said, I found the lesson book and I was one lesson ahead when I taught the students. And for me, that's great. You don't need to have gone through and done all the healing, because we're always on a perpetual state of growth. Mm-hmm. All right. For you to be able to use your story in the way that I'm able and invited to share some of my stuff today, and to someone that's just a little bit further behind, right? They're about to enter that phase that I've just come out of. And that's the beautiful thing, right? I'm so blessed, Yelena. It took me to 40, but I've found out my purpose. And my purpose on this planet, God, Allah, Buddha, Jesus, space, whatever, is to be known as the world's most positively influential speaker by being the world's best courage coach, right? That is my unwavering thing. And because I adore it, I do it unrelentingly. And I do it way more than any other job I've ever worked really hard. And it doesn't feel like work because it's my purpose.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And you talk a lot about some of these things, and you give a lot of tips in your book that recently came out in December, correct? So talk to us, give us like, what are some things people can look forward to if they're interested in just diving deeper into these topics that we're talking about today?
Well, the book's called Bet on You. All right. I was obviously a degenerate gambler at one point there. And that was a fun name given to me by the famous motivational speaker, Les Brown, who actually inspired the book and wrote the foreword for it. Right. But I wrote the book, for me, 10 years before I hit that rock bottom. I never knew that what I'd experienced as a kid was dysfunctional. I never knew what kind of negative impact it was going to have on me growing into an adult. I never knew the dysfunctional relationships I was likely to have because of what I went through as a kid. And so all I talk about is my own experience. It's kind of like a memoir self-help book. It's not a finger waggling thing. I've done it in a deliberate style that's really entertaining. My life has been very fulfilled in terms of outrageous shenanigans. And I wanted to use those examples in their brutal reality to be able to set examples and allow people not to feel quite so bad about themselves. So when you read it, it's super entertaining, it's wildly funny and heartwarming and sad at times. But then at the end of every chapter, there's like a Laban's random lesson. There's just like 1, 2, or 3 things that might be really beneficial. And the whole point about reading, and I've read more than 550 books over the last 4.5 years, right? That's a whole nother subject about self-development. But the whole point with the book is that you just need one thing in there that can completely shift your being and how you show up in the world. And it's done its job. And that's what I hope people will get when they get out of the book. And I'm so proud of it. It's getting such wonderful feedback from people. And what I find so interesting, Yelena, is that neither my mother or my father, who get a pretty good rap in the book, considering, and they've both been forgiven, and I love them dearly, haven't been able to get, my mum hasn't been able to get past chapter 4. My father, I don't think has even started reading it, right? So if you're going to write a book, don't expect everyone's going to read it in your family.
Yeah, no hard feelings. If they and so just the last question I have for you is, I'm sure that there's things you do on your day-to-day that kind of keeps you going, keeps you disciplined. I believe in consistency. It's something we preach very much with Best Mercedes. It's not about making these huge changes. It's just about those small little tiny steps, but consistently throughout your days and weeks and months and essentially your life. So are there some steps that you take on a daily basis that help you kind of this move forward?
Yeah, it's a combination of a few things, and you would have heard some of these. Certainly, being grateful. The moment that you step away from gratitude for what you do have, it's a spiral route that you don't want to go down. But I'm also super blessed. Like I mentioned, my wife Anna, we've been together 4 years in September, and I might be the world's best courage coach, right? But she's the most courageous person I know.
Mm-hmm.
And collectively, her and I, if I could share something personal with the audience today, her and I have gone through consecutively 16 miscarriages, including 2 ectopics, and one of which nearly killed her. And a year into our relationship, she opened up to me and shared with me, because I had been so honest and raw and vulnerable from the get-go. So men at the start of a relationship, truthful honesty, and I've lived a life, right? Because I had been so open and honest, Anna felt comfortable for the first time in her life sharing with me that from the age of 15 until 21, she'd been abused by her stepfather, which resulted in 2 pregnancies and 2 illegal forced abortions, one of which damaged the uterine wall and is the link between all the miscarriages, right? And you might be listening to this just horrified, but if you meet Anna, she's reclaimed her power, right? She's got a podcast that she created this year called the World's Best Trauma Recovery Podcast. She flew back to Russia last year when we were in Australia during the middle of the lockdown, subpoenaed by the Russian police to testify against this guy because she had the courage to tell her mum about it. The guy ended up getting off because it was outside of the statute of limitations. But Anna had an opportunity to share her story with one of the major magazines over there, and it went crazy viral. TV stations in Moscow wanted to fly us out there to be interviewed, and hundreds of women reached out to Anna. She put her email address in the article, that had all gone through variations of that kind of thing. And that's when you understand that can be your superpower, your gift, right? Mine was divorce. Anna went through what I would consider to be way worse than me. But again, I should never compare or diminish my own experience. She is healed. She's forgiven the perpetrator. She forgave her biological father for walking out, not protecting her, forgave her mother for not being there when she needed her the most. That is some inspirational stuff. So when you talk about staying on track, surround yourself with people that constantly inspire you. If you can't marry them, find them on YouTube.
I love that. And so where do you hang out with at social media wise? Where can people follow your journey, maybe even Anna's journey, if you want to share kind of where your where they can get your book?
Look, there's so many platforms now, isn't there? But really the best place to find all of that stuff is always going to be through the website, labanditchburn.com, LABANDITCHBURN. It'll be in the show notes, I'm sure. But the and the book's available on everywhere on Amazon. And I even managed to record the Audible in my voice
Oh,
when
that's
I was
awesome.
stuck in Berlin last year on the way through to Mexico. So if you like the sound of my voice, you can enjoy it on the Audible version.
That's awesome. I always love the Audible by actual authors. Whenever I hear it's like a person, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't. I want to hear the person. So I'm definitely gonna then now that I know that, I'm going to definitely listen to it because I think it brings a lot more authentic power to it, essentially. So Laban, thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm definitely gonna share all the links, guys, in the description below. Feel free to reach out to him and connect and buy his book and just continue to follow his journey. Laban, thank you again.
Spasibo большое, люблю, пока.